Yeah, that means it's recording. I just want to give it a little space to make sure it starts picking up. Okay. All right, this is my great uncle Milton Goldstein, and he's my father, Robert Edelman's uncle. He's my grandmother Ruth's brother. All right. And we're just going to talk. When were you born?
I was born in 1907 on Metropolitan Avenue in Brooklyn, but we left there because I got tired of it when I was 3 years old, and we moved to St. Louis.
Okay. What year were you born?
Now, I said 1907.
I was just making sure. And what date?
December the 31st.
You were born New Year's Eve?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
It's possible.
And who were your parents?
Parents were Jake, or for Jacob, and I think my mother's name. I'm trying to think. I can't think of my mother's name.
Fanny?
Huh?
Fanny?
No.
Is it on the thing there?
No, it isn't there. I really can't remember her name. Jenny.
That's it.
Jenny Goldstein.
Yeah.
She was born in a small town in Russia. She came over here with her parents. My father was born in Warsaw, Poland. They lived in Paris for a while, where he sang for a number of years in the Rothschild choir. He had a very fine voice, and when his voice started to change, he left the choir and the synagogue, and he became, I should say, anti-religious.
Mm-hmm.
So,
do you know what made him become that way?
He turned more or less to a communistic viewpoint of life.
Mm.
So that's why he left it, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
He was never a member of the party or anything, but he always used to argue their principles.
Mm-hmm.
So he came over to New York. At one time he was a streetcar conductor, leather worker, maybe something else, I don't know. He wasn't very close. Our family was never very close.
Mm-hmm.
I know families that every time somebody has a birthday or that, they have a party, but our family wasn't like that. In fact, when I was about 13 years old, I thought my sister was getting the best of it, and I ran away. And I ran away to Chicago. I had to come back because I was too young. I either had to come back or go to juvenile court. I ran away twice after that, one time to Dallas, Texas, and another time to New York. My mother and father broke up twice. The first time they came back together again. The second time they never did. Although they never divorced, my mother, as she got older, sort of hated my father. But by that time I was about 18 years old, didn't bother me, didn't seem to have any influence on my respect for either one. As I grew older, I realized my mother was had the better character of the two.
Hmm.
It was during the Depression, and I had joined the Army when I got to be 21. I had graduated high school. I had to learn. I said I knew the theoretical things of life, but I had to have a vocation. So I joined the Army and became a photographer, an aerial photographer, although I never did any aerial work because I was subject to motion sickness, and at that time they didn't have Dramamine. The only time I ever went up, the first time I went up, we flew over Manhattan, and there were open plains in those days. And he did a number of aerial maneuvers, and I threw up all over Manhattan. And when I come down, I had to clean up the ship, as it were.
Stepping back 1 minute to when your father, he was born in Warsaw, Poland,
Yeah.
then moved to Paris.
Yeah.
When did he come to America? What year?
I don't remember.
But did he come to Ellis Island?
You know, when I started to work for the government sometime later, they wanted to know what ship he was on.
Mm-hmm.
I had no way of knowing.
No.
Being he never told me, he never showed me his citizen papers or anything.
Okay. Is there pictures of him there? I thought we could get some close-ups of the pictures of your family there. Let's zoom in here.
The lady is my grand.
Stand it up a little straighter.
What?
Push it up straighter so it's straight up, like that. Yeah, perfect. Let me get a zoom in there. That is your paternal grandmother.
The lady, yes, I knew her. She lived on Avenue A in Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
Very tough, determined lady.
And it's your paternal grandfather right there.
The grandfather was dead by that time. I never saw him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And who's that down below there?
The single person is my father when he was
Okay.
younger.
It's not the best, but it'll do.
And he is with my uncle Harry Fellner, who was my wife's brother.
Okay. It's not coming in. Okay. All right. So they came over. It was the Depression.
Oh, it was much later.
What was the Depression like?
The Depression was like selling apples on the street for 5 cents. But the job rate was horrendous. It was very hard to get a job. So I was a burden more or less on my family because I wasn't working. And I decided to go to California. I started out hitchhiking, which was something you could do in those days. But I switched to trains in Kansas when there was and I got on the platform of the freight train where the brake wheel was and held on. By the time I got to Denver, I looked like a Negro from the smoke and cinders. So I learned that the best way to ride freight was inside an empty boxcar. There were quite a number of other people doing the same thing. In fact, one man had a dog, one person. A number of them were traveling with women.
Was it in California when you enlisted into the Army?
No.
No?
That was when I was trying to get to California.
Oh.
And it was a very nice ride, I will say, except at night when you got up about 10,000 foot and it got very cold. And the experienced rail travelers would scream at us if we had the door open, called us scenery bums. It was a beautiful ride. You went down the Royal Gorge and you saw the Rockies firsthand. When you get along the Mexican border, the immigration officials would come along, and we had a number of Mexicans on board, and they would carry their papers in what they called a grouch bag, a bull durham sack, you know. Of course, I had no papers, but they could tell from my way I talked and that and looked that I was a...
What year was this?
Let me try to think. Around 2930.
So it was just as the Depression was starting, pretty much. During
Yeah.
that period.
So, now how did I eat?
Now, how did you eat?
The thing was that a bunch of us fellas would get together and contribute nickels, dimes, quarters, and send somebody into town to get bakery goods, stale bakery goods usually, and you could get an awful lot of them in those days. One of the funniest things I saw is we come into a junction yard on the railroad, and there's a guy over on the another boxcar yelling, "Come on over to Joe's place. Beans a nickel. Check your baggage. Ice water free." And I thought it was very humorous that they were hustling these bums. But I did. Me and another guy got off and went into a cherry orchard. We thought we could pick up a buck or so picking cherries. The guy said, well, he's sorry, but they've already been picked, but we could have all we wanted to eat that were still on the trees. And they weren't bad. They were Bing cherries. So
Your the other pictures that you have here. This one here is the family.
Yeah, my mother and father's family.
Let's hold that up. Let's zoom in on that. Hold it straight up. Put it right in front of you. Let me try to get right in on that there. You can see everybody there. It was flash photography, so everybody's eyes got real big. And there you are in the upper left-hand corner. You're the infant, right?
It's right-hand corner.
Right, for you, yeah. Right. That's right, I understand. You're the infant, though.
Yeah.
Okay. Here you are, and there's all the names of all the people. Hold on a minute. Swing back here. Okay. Can always freeze this. And then over here is your mother, correct?
Yes, when she was a little older.
Yeah. That is your mother, Jenny. Jenny Well, her maiden name was Fellner, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Put it down.
Uh, so
So you got to, you're on your way to California, and you're on those freight cars, and this is how you ate and everything.
Yeah.
And then when did you join the Army? How did that all come about?
well, I joined the Army when I got back to St. Louis. Let me tell you how I lived first.
Okay.
Like in San Francisco, you went into the Salvation Army.
Mm-hmm.
They fed you, and they washed your clothes and ironed your clothes, which I thought was very nice.
Package
The
food?
ironing wasn't so perfect, but it wasn't bad. And there's where I learned that there were Jewish charity places where you could go and get clothes and get a meal. They wouldn't give you a meal, they'd give you meal tickets.
Mm-hmm.
So I got into...
Do you remember the name of the organizations? The Jewish organizations? No?
I don't remember them. But the one in Los Angeles, you could stay 5 days, and then you had to get out. It was supported by the Jewish movie actors. You know, they had money at the time. I even got down into Tijuana, and I wanted to cross the bridge into Mexico, and the guy said, "How much money you got?" And I said, $5. He said, "You have to go back and get a passport or something." So I walked down about 100 yards, and there was a dry riverbed, and I just
Went across.
walked over into Tijuana.
What'd you do in Tijuana?
In Tijuana, I just looked around. There was prohibition in the United States at the time, and they had a tremendous amount of liquor stores of liquors I had never seen before or since.
Or since. Okay. So,
Then I
go on.
came home. We were never really harassed on the train, although one time we had to get off and wait for another train because the sheriff didn't want us to come into town. There was too many of us really on the train for him to arrest or accommodate in his jails. But anyway, I got back to St. Louis, and I couldn't get a job, so I thought, well, I'll join the Army. So when I became 21, I joined the Army. They sent me to Chanute Field, which is about 25 miles north of Champaign-Urbana in Illinois, and learned photography. I had my choice of practically any airfield in the world. But I figured, well, I'll go up to Mitchell Field, which was on Long Island, because I had all the relatives in New York. I'd have done better going to the Philippines or something like that, but I didn't want to get on the boat, being out subject to motion sickness. So
So this period of history was obviously after World War I
yeah.
and before World War II. Were there any conflicts going on in the world at the time that you had concern about?
No. There was none that I can remember. I wasn't that interested. There wasn't any big ones, let's say. There's always conflicts. So after my hitch was up, I left the Army, came back to St. Louis.
What year was this? Do you remember?
I guess, let's see, about 35.
And from there, so how many years were you in the Army?
3 years.
3 years, okay.
Uh, as as far as things like that go, in the Second World War,
Mm-hmm.
I had joined the Merchant Marines
How come?
because I didn't want to get in the regular Army. The Merchant Marines paid better, and they sent me to. Well, I was married by that time, but anyway, I finally wound up on a seagoing tug, and it was a brand new boat, and I was a mess steward,
Okay.
which means I
Cook.
made up the beds and helped the cook. No, I didn't cook.
Yeah, you helped them.
So we come to the Houston ship channel, and we had to wait overnight for a pilot up the river, and myself and a number of the other crew became real sick, and I jumped ship at Houston.
You decided to, did you get out of the Merchant Marines at that time? Was that it? So you went AWOL, so to speak?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I told the captain I was leaving. He said, okay, as long as I don't see you, leave. Somebody threw up on him. When we were in the Gulf, it was beautiful there. After my work was done, I used to lay on the bow and watch the porpoise. They would come by and swim just in front of the ship. You could see them cross over and small one. They'd do that for about a half hour, and then they left. And then they'd come back later on. And we had a dirigible going above us to sort of protect us. I asked the captain if a submarine came there, because there were a number of sinkings of ships, American ships in that area.
Right.
That
Where was this?
in the Gulf of Mexico.
Oh, really? Huh.
We were supposed to go through the Panama Canal and wind up at Frisco. So he said, well, I said, what kind of armament do we carry? He said, we got some 45s. And he said, but they wouldn't waste a submarine. I mean, yes, not a torpedo on such a small boat as we were. I said, what about the deck guns? They'd have sunk us if we'd have. But we didn't come across any, at least not while I was on it.
So when you jumped ship in Houston, what'd you do after that?
I went back to St. Louis. A friend of mine by the name of Sid Wyman, whom I grew up, and this goes into my gambling area, got me a job in a book. There were quite a number of them in St. Louis at the time. A handbook where you could bet on horses and sporting events.
A bookie joint, as they call them?
Yeah. The boss in the bookie joint was a fellow named Charlie Rich. They call him Cupie, but later on they both became part owners of the Dunes in Las Vegas. So I worked there a while as a clerk. I met my future wife on a blind date, and I got married. I was 32 years old when I got married.
What year was this? When's your anniversary date?
Let's see, I'm trying. 32 and 7 is 39.
1939?
Yeah.
What date did you get married? I'm soaking you for all you're worth here. Alright, so whatever, 1939 you got married.
Yeah.
To Irene
Giblin, who was a Gentile. She was a very ethical person, not like me. And she always wanted to go to Hawaii. I think we went 2 or 3 times to Hawaii
And
after I retired.
where did you get married? In St. Louis?
In St. Louis.
Remember the place?
City Hall.
City Hall, wrote just a quick,
Yeah.
go to the Justice of the Peace and
Yeah, that's
got
it.
your marriage license and went off and got yourself an apartment, or
Yeah, we got an apartment.
did she work?
Yes, that was why I never got married a little sooner. I felt that I had to make enough money to support both of us. Her money went to her mother and father, who were real old. In fact, her father died when he was a little over 100. And so
Where was her family from? What was her background like? What did,
she was pure American.
well, what?
I mean, I don't know from what.
Many generations, in other words?
Huh?
She'd been here for many, her family generations had been here for many years?
They came originally from Kentucky
Wow, okay.
on the covered wagons.
Wow.
I had seen covered wagons at one time. You know, Conestoga wagons,
Yeah.
I think they're called.
Yeah.
But
So you were working at the bookie place
yeah,
when you got married?
I think I was.
Yeah. Then what did you do after? How many years were you doing that?
About 2 or 3 years, I think.
Uh-huh.
And then I found out there was an opening in civil service for a photographer in the federal building. So I took the exam and passed it and got the job. I think at that time I was making $1,200 a year.
Wow.
And we were living on it. It seems rather funny. It surprises me that, you know, of course you did, in those days you did what you had to do, more or less, as it wasn't too illegal to earn a living and to stay alive. I used to, when I was working in the book, about once a month I'd get arrested. And we'd go down to the station house. They wouldn't put me in the cell. There was a bench there we could sit on. And the bondsman came along and got you bonded out, and you never went to court on it. Now, when did I go to? Oh, yes. There was, before I got married, I went to California with a fellow whose mother and father died. And I told him, I said, I was broke, you're going to have to carry me. So we went out to California. I worked in a book there. I got arrested. It was a different setup. It's no use going into how they operate legally or illegally. Anytime there is a book going, you know that the police are getting paid some way. So I got arrested, put in a cell. I got dressed in with these clothes, these overalls and that, because the bondsman was so long in coming, and he let me out. I mean, yes, he got me out, rather.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you ever meet any of the gangsters?
I used to, even when I was married, there was a place where I used to go, and the cops used to come there, and the times are still rather hard, and they would, the pool room owner would give them a pack of cigarettes. They're very cheap, these cops. And there used to be gangsters in there, but I didn't have anything the gangsters wanted. I knew one thing about gangsters. They're all right if you don't have anything. If you have anything that they really want, they are not such a...
Nice.
Yes, I knew some gangsters.
You remember the names?
Yeah, one guy's name was Tony LePip. He died in a federal hospital. Another one they called Shardy Ralph. And a fellow by the name of Giardino. You know, all Italians.
Mm-hmm.
The gangsters I knew. There were Irish gangsters there, and I could have gone at one time. There was a gambling place across the river in Illinois, and I could have gone to work there, but I didn't care for it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I am now working for the government.
World War II is on now.
Yeah, here comes World War II.
Do you remember December 7th when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in order to keep my job, because they sort of more or less disbanded the section I was in, I had to go down to Mobile, Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'll show you something here. This is when I was young, but
I'll get some. I'll take some of those at the end. I'll tape a lot of those. Make sure we save a lot of room.
here I am.
Lift that up.
This one. I will. In a government station wagon where I...
Well, there's a picture on the way there. It fell out. There, it fell down. Yeah. You lift that up again. There we go.
That's Ruth.
Hmm.
No, it might be me. I don't know.
There you are.
Yeah, by the government station. I went to various airfields and army fields
Yeah.
in Florida, Alabama, and Georgia.
And that's you there, and that's you right there. And then that's you and Ruth. Grandma Ruth. Right, there you are. And there's Mother and Ruth. And there's you and Ruth. Okay. Okay, good.
So,
So let's see here. You were in Alabama.
Georgia and Florida. Oh, we lived in Mobile, yes. It was during war times a very nice town, but very crowded. We lived in one room,
Mm-hmm.
and if you didn't get to the cafeteria or something in time,
Mm-hmm.
you got very little to eat.
No, Irene was with you, and Irene was with
Yeah.
you during all this stuff.
Irene got a job with the government going to munition dumps. Have you ever seen those igloos that they use?
Maybe in pictures.
Uh-huh. And anyway,
So
we got it wasn't too far from New Orleans, so we went over to New Orleans quite a number of times. And I think the war didn't end. I don't know why we did come back to St. Louis, but I think they were breaking up the. You see, I had to take pictures mostly of construction, so they could say to the contractor, "This is how the job looked at a certain date." The funny thing about the government, none of their rules are standard. You'd come into one army field or airfield, didn't make any difference, and the provost marshal would say, "Well, here's this and here's that and here's the other thing, and I'll give you a soldier to ride around with, so you're taking the right pictures." The next one you went to, you thought it was the most secret place in the world. I remember the time I went into one, and they had a gunnery training building where you sat on a balcony, and they had a screen with airplanes flying, and you used a movie camera gun, and that's the way they trained the gunners. And it was very secret, except next week it'd come out in Life. Oh, God.
What was the, during that period, the 40s and all, do you remember when the war ended, the day the war ended with Germany and Europe?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
Not exactly.
Kind of just happened, and do you remember when they dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
I remember that, but I don't remember the dates. When we were in Hawaii, we took a boat trip out to Pearl Harbor, and we saw the tops of the warships which they left in the harbor. In fact, they're still listed as being part of the U.S. Navy, I think.
What was your impression of the nuclear bombs? Yeah.
My impression, I am glad they dropped it. Of course, Truman said that if they hadn't dropped it, there'd have been many more lives lost than was.
Do you remember when the war ended and the footage came of like the death camps in Nazi Europe, you know, the concentration camps? And
didn't see much of that. I did see the ones where they were in and showed all these practically skeletons, as it were, of people that they buried in the places. I understand that none of these death camps were in Germany.
Somewhere.
Which ones?
Well, Dachau, Bergen.
Dachau was in Germany?
Sure.
Yeah.
So,
being I wasn't very religious, although I figured that if Hitler had won, I'd be a lampshade.
Yeah.
I'm glad our side won. Oh, incidentally, what war was it? Korean War or something like that? Anyway, I was working for a printing company. And I had to go down to see about being in the Army. I'd been in the Army once, but that didn't make any difference. And I went down there, and who'd I find down there but the guy that owned the company. In other words, he wasn't considered essential to the war work, and I was. But they passed me up as a 4F.
Which was what?
Huh?
A 4F is?
Well, they said this finger, which I had lost part of in a...
Let me get that.
in a...
Accident?
Yeah, printing press.
Ouch.
I couldn't shoot a rifle on my... It would interfere with shooting a rifle on my left side, and then that set up for left-handed shooting. Is that right?
I don't know.
You never shot a rifle?
I'm a lefty, so I shoot with my left finger like this.
Yeah.
And you're a righty. So,
Yeah. So I've had, so they didn't take me, they didn't take him either, I don't think. But I went from there into the government service. They have a printing plant, although they're going to move it soon, where they made maps and charts for the Air Force, and they use very large cameras. We had a camera that would take a piece of film 48 by 60 inches. It would come in great big rolls like this. And it was made specially for the Air Force. And we made, the trouble is sometimes you'd shoot something about this big. It had a great big camera.
Well, so we're in the 50s now, and the Korean War, and you were just doing photographs for the government during that period. When did you move to Florida?
I moved to Florida when I retired. I was, let's see, I was 60. I was 60. I moved to Florida as soon as I got to retire. We went to Houston. We went to Hawaii to see what. Now Hawaii would be a nice place to retire, but it was too far from my wife's family, and she was very close to her family. So we finally wound up in Florida, which she liked very much. I bought a house there, a 3-bedroom house for $18,000. They had all kind of houses at that time. That is where I got lucky. That's the only way I can say it.
How'd you get lucky?
Huh?
How did you get lucky?
Because when my wife died and I sold it, I walked out of there with $65,000, and I didn't have to pay the government anything. It's
very nice.
It was very, and that's when I started giving my money away.
Who'd you give your money away to?
You? Daniel.
Yeah.
Sarah Beth. My wife's relations, who were very nice to me and still are. Their children. So that's where the money went. I'm not broke now by any manner of means.
Yeah.
But the money don't, well, right now I'm not really physically able to do a lot of things I'd like to do, but I have been to London twice. It's after my wife died. My wife and I have been to Hawaii 2 or 3 times. I've been to Peru.
Peru?
Oh, yes, what a place. Oh, what a place. It was a real cheap thing. I mean, in price, it cost us about $800. And they flew us there. We first went to Lima, and then they took us down on I think it was a tributary of the Amazon. We went into the jungle, which I never saw any animals. And It was a marvelous. We went to Machu Picchu, which it had a lot of Inca ruins there and that, but it was a marvelous trip. I went with my brother-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
See, where else have I been? I've been to Japan. Landed in Kyoto and took the bullet train into Tokyo. And Japan is very much regimented. Before you can buy a car, you have to have a place to garage it. You can't put it on the street. The funny thing about Japan and what they produce, I also have been to Hong Kong. You get things cheaper, Japanese things cheaper in Hong Kong or even the United States than you do in Japan.
Yeah.
It's rather funny that way.
What, when you were growing up,
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about the great American pastime. You had mentioned when we were talking
Baseball?
yesterday. Yeah. Yesterday we were talking about some of the players. You say you saw Babe Ruth play.
Yes. At that time, the Cardinals had what they call a knothole game. You sat in the bleachers for a quarter, if you know if you're young enough.
Yeah.
So, oh yes, I saw Babe Ruth.
See him hit a home run?
No, he didn't hit any home runs there. He wasn't in the National League.
All right.
He was in the American League, and they played the Browns.
Uh-huh.
And I saw Joe DiMaggio.
No.
A fella hit a very high, long fly to deep center field. Now, DiMaggio didn't catch it, but he made a beautiful run. He knew what he was doing all the way.
Yeah.
Beautiful outfielder. And then, of course, I saw more of the Cardinals than I did the Browns.
Who are some of the big pitchers that you remember? Who's one of the best pitchers that you ever saw?
I think Bob Feller, but I didn't care much for him personally. I had heard stories about him, and he didn't seem like a nice guy off the field.
Mm.
Of course, those were the days when Ruth got the most, and I think he made 100,000.
During the 30s.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I saw Campanella, whom I thought was a marvelous catcher. When there was a foul ball hit overhead, if he knew that it was going to hit the screen, he wouldn't go after it, you know, like a lot of catchers do. He was a marvelous catcher.
Oh, Dizzy Dean, did you ever see?
Yeah, Dizzy Dean. He later turned out to be a broadcaster and a woman chaser, and he was strictly a clown. But he and his brother were very fine pitchers.
That's right.
I saw a couple of World Series, but as I told you, my friend Wyman got us tickets. We had to, when he and I went, we had to sit on the steps because we got usher's passes.
All right.
But later on he gave me regular tickets, and I went to one game and gave the rest of them to my wife, because a World Series game, outside of the importance you put on it, is just like any other ball game.
Mm-hmm.
Take this 14-15 deal. Who was it? Montreal and Philadelphia?
Toronto.
Toronto and Philadelphia. So that doesn't show any great capability on either side. Not with those scores.
Did you go to any football games? See any good football?
No. I went to one football game in New York City,
Yeah.
and Benny Friedman, who had come out of Michigan, was the quarterback. I went up to the Polo Grounds, and he was a very fine. Most quarterbacks, when they throw a ball, they throw it very hard because they want it to get there as fast as they can. They don't want it to be intercepted. But I noticed about Friedman, he threw a sort of a soft pass, but he was a very good football player at that.
What else? What else can you tell going back in time with your family? I know you kind of you weren't that close with them. You kind of went your own way. But do you remember what your parents were like? As you know, day-to-day people? I mean, growing up as a...
my mother and father were never very close to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wasn't the type that my father would take me out in the woods and show me things and all that.
Yeah.
I remember he never spanked me.
Do you wish he would have?
No. I didn't miss it that much. He never spanked me, and he didn't play cards, which was something unusual.
Back then, were cards looked upon as like sinful, quote unquote? You know what I mean? Like, were they?
Well, they played bridge and things, and poker.
Yeah.
Those games, gambling games were always around. Poker. I don't think gin was. Gin hadn't come in. They played some sort of rummy or that. But my father never did learn. My father never smoked. I never saw him drunk. He drank once in a while, not maybe 2 glasses of the most of whiskey or that.
Yeah.
So, and I was raised on cocoa. I wasn't raised on coffee.
Cocoa, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were you raised on?
Milk.
Milk? Sorry.
Milk and orange juice. The let's see, your grandparents.
Yes.
On your father's side.
Yeah.
Did you ever know them?
I just met the grandmother who was living. Her husband had died.
Those pictures.
Yeah.
Those pictures you showed me was
Yeah.
your paternal, right? Your paternal, okay.
And she had 6 or 7 children, and half of them liked her, and half of them didn't. I mean, got along with her, half of them didn't. And she wanted a raise in her allowance, so she took them to court and sued them and won. That was during the time of Prohibition, and she used to get me grain alcohol, which you could drink. And I used to get them for the guys in the barracks, $5 a gallon.
Wow.
Very cheap for grain alcohol.
Yeah. Huh. And then what about your maternal grandparents? Do you have pictures of them?
No, I don't.
Just, just.
My maternal grandmother was a witch. Ooh, I hated
What was her name?
her. Her name is Ullman. She had married after her Fellner had died. They had a dry goods store in Vicksburg, Mississippi at one time. I'd never been there. But I'd go over to her house, and she was very absent-minded, and she'd forget something. Where she put something, she'd accuse me of stealing it.
Was she older at this point? Think she was a little senile, maybe?
Huh?
Think she was a little senile?
I wouldn't doubt it. Her brother had a son, and my grandmother, this grandmother, had a very vicious mouth. To look at her, she looked like the most, angelic person you could ever see, and she started cussing out her sister-in-law, and the son was going to hit her. Actually, folks, he hit her, but the father prevented it. But she had a nasty job.
Who are some of the other people in there?
Other people.
Let me go the other way.
These are the Fellners.
Oh, here we go.
Here. One of them.
Hold it up and then tell me who everyone is.
If I can.
If you can.
This big one is
Yeah.
the Fellner boys.
The
One
cousin.
of them was the best behaved child I ever saw. His mother was a school teacher at one time.
Yeah.
Later on, one of them became manager of a rayon plant in Foley, Florida. Now, rayon, it wasn't rayon. It was like a blotter stuff,
Yeah.
And from that they made, it was made from wood pulp.
Mm-hmm.
They'd come in with all these scrawny logs and
Mm-hmm.
process them and come out like paper. And
Are they cousins of your mother?
yes,
They were Jenny Fellner's cousins.
yeah.
I see.
And on the other side here, who do you got?
The other side, let's see,
Go
I
ahead.
have to see myself. Yeah, this is Simon here,
Yeah.
who is a
He,
athletic instructor in the New York schools. In fact, I could have become one.
where the two guys or the single guy? The one guy.
That
Oh, there
one
he
guy
is. Simon. I see.
Simon,
Yeah, I see him. Simon Goldstein. Now, who was he? Who was he? Was your?
my father's brother.
Ah, he's your uncle Simon.
Yeah.
What was he like?
He was all right. He was a better cook than his wife.
Now, were any of these people religious at all? Jewishly? Were they?
I would say no.
Yeah. And who was the,
Maybe my grandmother was.
who was the gentleman in the military uniform down there
Where?
on the lower?
In the uniform?
Yeah.
That is Sal Fellner,
Which?
the father of these two. My mother's brother.
That's your mother's brother. Is that World War I?
Yes, I think so.
Was he in the war?
He was in the Judge Advocates. He was a
Mm.
lawyer.
Okay. And who are these people here sitting on the curb?
That's my mother's brother Harry and his wife.
Okay. Let's see
She
that.
was a manicurist.
Okay. It's a living. All right.
And yeah, it's two pictures of him.
Okay.
See, who's this over here? Oh, this is a Fellner family. All I know are the boys. I don't know their wives and that.
Have those boys passed away, the cousins?
I don't think so. I think they may be still living, but I don't know. He passed away.
Yeah, sure.
He got himself into trouble, some shenanigans with the veterans after the war.
Yeah.
I think he got disbarred.
Oh, wow.
The typical family.
What, when you look at kids nowadays and you look at kids back then, you know, what's the problem with kids nowadays in your mind? I mean, I remember you at one point were real big into math. You were tutoring mathematics.
Yeah.
You were tutoring kids and.
Well,
Was it the kid or was it
Most
the
of
parents?
the schools I tutored at were, the blacks were predominant, and they had just one parent.
Yeah.
And in school, you have to get support at home because the teachers, the classes are too large, really. I decided, I don't know how true it is, but anytime a teacher has over 20 in a class, she's in trouble. I decided that what happens, say she's showing them something new and arithmetic, why, the quick learners get it right off and they get bored. The regular learners, you have to tell them a couple of times and they get it. And then you have the slow learners. Now, the slow learners don't mean that they are not intelligent, because sometimes they start to blossom when they get older, and you might have noticed that in some of the classes you took, if you knew the fellows well enough.
Yeah, as I got older, I noticed. Keep talking. I mean, as I got older, some courses became easier than others.
Yeah.
Now, what got you interested in mathematics? I mean, why did you enjoy tutoring mathematics?
It sort of fascinated me, and I never went even as far as being able to teach algebra, which I thought in its basic form is rather useless.
Yeah, that's true. I agree with you on that.
You can do it arithmetically, like I have a problem. This place has a sale, 20% off.
Right.
And I buy this article for $56. What was the original price?
No, don't even ask me that. I use a calculator.
That won't tell you.
Yeah. So how do you figure that out?
Well, it don't make any difference. And did you ever have bases?
Basis. No.
Well, you see, our counting system is on a base of 10, but there are other counting systems on 7, 12, any number you want. The Babylonians had a counting system on 54. I don't know. They had to cut it down. It was too hard to remember. See, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9, that's 0.
Right.
That's 10 symbols. So that's what our counting system is based on.
Right.
You say 14, it means 1, 10, and 4.
Right.
You got a base 7, you'd say 14 means 1, 7, and 4 means 11.
Right. Okay.
Or whatever.
Okay. Trying to think what else.
Oh, you mean
Do you remember any historical events that really stand out in your mind as really made a difference in the world? Computers, television, and what?
No, they.
What have you seen that really made an impression on you?
Well, unfortunately, I have a book on math at home, and computers are based on the Boolean algebra, which is 0 and 1.
Mm-hmm.
You know that?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Huh?
I've heard of that.
And those things make an impression on me.
How a computer works.
Yes, either it's go or no go.
and how fast it thinks and all that? Do you feel computers have changed mankind? That's if you want to say it like that.
Well, I just take them like I take the automobile. Now, I very much, when I was, before they came in with all this electronic stuff, I used to do my own tune-ups and that. And I was very much interested. In fact, I used to hang around the garage.
Oh, you did?
When I had time.
As a teenager?
No. Much older.
Much older?
And
obviously,
I'd run parts for him, go get parts. Later on, I bought a couple of cars, and he sold them because I am good at buying things, but I'm terrible at selling things. I'm not a good salesman. When they say no, I believe them. You know how that is.
Oh, yeah.
So, but when they come in with this computers and all that, all I can do is change plugs. Or maybe change the oil or things like that. But the technical things, a garage man once told me you need $30,000 worth of instruments to plug in. So I never did go back to it or learn it.
What, jumping back a minute, let's talk about your mom, Jenny.
My mom was a very...
She had strong character.
Very strong character. Much stronger than my father. And I didn't realize it till I became much older. She became more or less senile. We had to put her in a nursing home, and
was she a good cook?
She was a marvelous cook. That was the trouble.
Jenny, yeah. What did she make?
Well, she made her. In those days they made their own noodles. They went and got bunches of vegetables from vegetable soup. There were I don't remember there must have been cans in those.
Everything was fresh, though, you remember.
Huh?
Everything was fresh.
Yeah. And the only thing she couldn't do well, she couldn't make fried chicken. The joints would always be bloody. That was the only thing. I remember one time when I came home from school and she gave me some liver. It was about an inch thick, like a steak. It was marvelous.
Yeah. Steak and onions?
Yes.
Go on.
She was your grandmother Ruth tried to learn how to cook like her, but Ruth would turn her head and my mother would put something in and
that'd be it. Do you remember what it was like before we had central air conditioning? What did you used to do in the hot, humid St. Louis summers without air conditioning?
I lived in the top floor, and when I come home, the bread was baked. We had it 100 or over in St. Louis for a month. You just endured it like you do other things.
Did you buy blocks of ice?
No.
No?
They did. By that time, they had refrigerators, I think, but they didn't have the Iceman had gone out. You know where they had the window box had even gone out.
Yeah. Do you remember in the winter, in the cold of winter?
Yes, 10 below.
How'd you keep warm?
Well, by that time I owned a house, and
well, growing up as a kid, like wood stoves? Did you have just wood stoves?
No, we had coal stoves, and I used to have to take the ashes out.
Yeah.
You had the coal in a bin, and fire up the furnace. It was something everybody did. The town was full of smoke
Mm-hmm.
because they were using coal from Illinois at that time. It produced a lot of smoke. In fact, I can remember in St. Louis when we first moved there, the water would come out of the faucets sort of rusty. So they put in a drive to have a water plant, and they put in a pretty good water plant because you may not know it, but water tastes differently everywhere you go.
I know it. You taste it.
And another thing I noticed were the roads. Illinois, when I was young, had I think more concrete roads than anybody. Missouri had mud roads. And they ran a campaign to get Missouri out of the mud. But about the only thing that could go through these mud roads were the Fords, which are very light.
Do you remember when what you were doing when President Kennedy was assassinated?
Yes, that I remember. I was in a discount house buying something, and it came over the radio, and somebody said it, and it affected me very much.
Why?
Because he was the president in the first place. I liked him. I thought he had the good idea. He was a very charmistic person.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a shame. Although there were people that didn't like him, but I think most of the people in the United States did. It was a tragic family, it seemed. One brother died in the war. His airplane was shot down. John Kennedy was shot. Robert Kennedy was shot.
Mm-hmm.
And one daughter was mentally unbalanced. So very sad.
When kind of a sort of a crazy question for you, but when time comes and
I have to die?
it happens, when the time comes, how do you want to be remembered? Like, what do you want to pass on? Because the reason why I want to do these videos is so that my kids, my grandkids, and my great-grandkids are going to know who you are. Because all I have are these pictures of your.
Yeah.
But now, because of the power of video,
Yeah.
you'll have. So if you have to pass on advice, things that you want to pass down to people in future generations.
No, I don't want to pass anything down. I figure when you're dead, you're DED dead.
DED?
And that's the end of the story. I often think of, I am not religious, but I figure there must be something. Now when I say something, I don't mean human, or looks like human, but the only way we can think of him as human. But there must be something, because there is order in the universe. But if it's a force, or if it pays much attention to man, he's just a product of an evolutionary happening. It's hard to say, but like I believe that if the world we were on would end tomorrow, it wouldn't make any difference in the universe.
Yeah.
Because of that order?
Huh?
Because of the order?
There's some chaos
Yeah.
out there too, like that meteorite that fell in Jupiter.
Yeah.
Now, one of those could kill. They say that's what killed the dinosaurs.
No. Who knows? So, if you had to leave anything,
Huh?
if you had to leave anything to your great nephews and nieces and whatnot, what would that be?
Any philosophical sayings? Nothing.
Pay your taxes and be nice to each other, right?
Yeah. Well, that would have to come from their parents, usually. But unfortunately, I can only give money. I would like to give part of myself, but like this part of the family, I only can visit. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
But I try to do the best I can. I'm not a bad guy. I'm not a good guy. I'm just an ordinary guy.
Is that how you want to be remembered?
That's all.
Anything else you want to add?
Not necessarily.
All talked out?
No, I'm not all talked out because we haven't covered the time when I lived in Florida with my wife in the house. My wife thought it was wonderful.
We visited you.
Huh?
We visited you,
Yeah.
and you took me to the United States Swimming Hall of Fame
Yeah.
down in Fort Lauderdale. I remember
Yeah,
that.
down there. And I think people were practicing laps then, weren't they?
Yeah.
It's a real nice pool. So,
What did you enjoy about retirement?
about what?
Retirement. Living in Florida.
Let me tell you what I do. Everybody thinks, oh boy, if I didn't have to do this, it gets boring after a while.
Okay.
So I did. I'm sorry. What do they call this? I did work where I don't get volunteer work. So I had volunteered. I started out in a pediatric care center where they had mongoloids, children, and
Down syndrome.
yeah, and all that sort of thing. Mostly mongoloids, hydrocephalics, autistics. The funny thing I can't understand, we used to take some of the children to the lake. There was a lake there to the shore, and you had to watch them every minute. If they fell face down in the water, they would stay there. They wouldn't kick or scream or yell,
Yell.
yeah,
Yeah.
or anything.
No survival
Yeah.
instinct.
Huh?
They didn't have a survival instinct.
Why not? I thought everybody that self-survival was the first law of nature, but they didn't have it. You had to rush in and pick them up. Then I worked down at the jail, the Florida, like every other state, has a number of counties which have a number of municipalities. We had about 30 in the county I lived in, and I had seen a number of murders, and we had a woman in there one time. We put her in a holding cell, and she screamed for 3/4 of an hour. But you met all the lower elements as they were brought in. I was used mostly as a gopher, you know, run errands for him, go up to the stairs and get fingerprints, or somebody came to the window, I would talk to them. After a while, I gave it up because I was working the midnight to 8 shift, and Irene said that she didn't like to be home by herself that much. So that's when I at one time worked for HRS, which was a social service agency. I didn't work for them, I volunteered for them. And I used to go around usually and drive some of these juveniles to where they had to go. One had a cast on his wrist. I don't know how he broke it, but he pulled it off. He didn't want it on. I called him a rebel without cause. He wanted to do whatever he wanted to do, and I tried to explain to him he lived in a society and he couldn't do it. So anyway, about a week later, he went out to Nevada to live with his grandmother, and about a week later, he committed suicide. And I understand there are quite a number of young children that commit suicide.
Mm-hmm.
I knew of a lieutenant that was head of a juvenile jail. He let me see some of the records of these kids. Some of them are bastards. Mm-hmm. They were so mean that their mothers and fathers asked them to be taken away, you know, or they'd beat their mother or father. A couple of them would go down and forge their father's name and get all the money out. But as a general rule, most of them wound up as street children, which meant they were in some form of prostitution is how they lived, mostly. Although there was a kid there about 10 years old. He had been abandoned when he was 6, and he lived on the street. He broke open parking meters and telephone boxes.
What got you interested in working with, handicapped kids, prisoners? I mean, why did you volunteer for those type of services?
What got me interested, I really believe, and I'm not waving the flag now, that I owe a duty to my country, that I can live the way I do, and I try to pay back, not by cheating on my income tax, but I tried to pay back by doing volunteer work. So the first work I did was the Pediatric Care Center, and then at one time I was a legal guardian, which meant that you went to the probate court and the judge gave you control of this person, more or less about 90% control. Like I had a man living in a house with water on. When it rained outside, it rained inside. And he had frogs and lizards and roaches. And it's a wonder he didn't kill himself, because he had a lot of plug-in connections for the electricity. And I got him out of there and got him into a retirement home, so-called.
Yeah.
He finally died of a massive stroke. The nicest lady I had, very nice lady, only she gave her money away. So anyway, she had what they call brittle diabetes. Her diabetes to go up and down, but she was on dialysis. I had her about a month and she died. This fellow with the house, I sold it for him.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the one thing where I didn't have the complete control. I had to go to the court,
Yeah.
and we had a meeting of the judge and the real estate guy. And there are people that go around, they have permanent crews, they buy these houses up. Like I think this one sold for about $21,000.
What
And
year
they-
was this?
Huh?
What year was this?
Must have been at least 15 years or 20 years ago.
Mm.
And they put the house in shape and they make money on it.
Mm.
So I asked the judge when we first started, what are the rules? Who makes the rules? He says he does, and that's. I knew it was senseless for me to argue with him. Anyway, there were two fellows that wanted the house. So one fellow lost, and he took it to the Circuit Court of Appeals. I thought it was a waste of money myself, and he lost there too.
What was Aunt Irene like as a person? What attracted you to her back in 1939 when you got married? I mean, what was it
Aunt
about?
Irene had been married before.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think she lived with her husband, if I can remember rightly. And she got married on a dare. She went with some people that got married, and they said, why don't you and this guy get married? So but she never lived with him. So she was a hard worker. One of the things that attracted with me, I have an aunt, or I did have an Aunt Fanny. I don't know if she's still alive or not, but we went up to see her one time. And my Aunt Fanny said, your wife loves you more than you love her.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I love her to the best of my ability.
What does that mean?
That means I kept 10% for myself. Because Aunt Irene said she didn't know what she would do. She'd go all to pieces if I had died first.
And what year did she die?
About 7 years ago, I should think.
Late 80s. And what did she
We
die
were
from?
married 48 years.
Wow. Good 48 years?
Yes, it was a pretty good 48 years.
Yeah. What did she die from?
She had colon cancer, and Robert saw her and told her that she'd be in a lot of pain. She didn't want to wear one of those bags.
Mm.
I think I should have been more determined in trying to get her away from that attitude. But
Was she prideful?
Huh?
She had a sense of pride that she didn't want to succumb to that. Yeah.
Robert told her, said, when this cancer hits your, well, the last year of her life, she was existing on morphine, liquid morphine that was prescribed for her. She was these hospice people would come over and sort of, but her sister and brother-in-law, her sister came down and lived with us for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Her brother-in-law didn't like it too much, but his sister didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel sort of indebted to them
Mm-hmm.
for what they did. But I came in one day And Irene said, just open my eyes, I can't see. Her eyes were open.
Mm.
She lost an enormous amount of weight. She looked like her father. She didn't look like a woman at all. She looked like her father who died when he was 100.
Mm-hmm.
And she died about 3 days later. They come and, because I had her cremated.
Is that what she wanted?
Yes. And they took away in a sack, a plastic bag, body bag. And I didn't cry or anything. About 2 or 3 weeks later, I was talking to a fella who had lost his father, and all of a sudden, I started to cry like a baby.
Just hit you, huh? Uh-huh. That happens.
She wanted me to kill her. She couldn't stand the pain. But unfortunately, at that time, there was a fella that had killed his wife because she was an incurable case, and he got 5 years in jail. And I told her I didn't think it was worth the 5 years in jail.
That was that 10%, right? That was the 10%.
I don't know how you feel, but
yeah.
Do you feel 100% for your wife?
I don't think it's natural to feel 100%. I think you're right. 90-10's fair.
But like I say, the aunt said my wife loved me a lot more than I loved her. I loved her to the extent of my ability and my brain would allow me.
Yeah. And what about yourself? I mean, when time comes.
I have 3 things. I have TIA, which is trans ischemic attacks, which are small strokes, and that's where I fall and that.
Break your wrist.
Break my wrist and other things. And I have myasthenia gravis, which is a neurological disease.
Yeah.
And I got a flubber-dubber heart.
I love that one.
So I asked the neurologist, what's my prognosis, and she laughed. In other words, my father dropped dead on the street, and I most likely, being I've got 3 things going against me, I most likely will die very fast, for which I am thankful I am. I can stand a certain amount of pain,
yeah,
but I'm not going around looking for it.
You have
like I had a proctoscope a couple of months ago, and parts of it are painful. Did you ever have one?
I prefer not to.
Huh?
No, not yet, thank God. What are you going to be? Do you have a place where you're going to be buried? Do you hope to be? We hope.
No, I'll be cremated. That part don't bother me, you see, because I will be dead.
What if it made other people happy to bury you instead of cremate you? Would you then prefer to be buried?
No.
No.
I think it's perpetuating. It reminds me when I was in Japan, I went into a religious place. Oh, I love those, kind of houses or homes they had or whatever. And they had a cemetery there, and they must have all been cremated because the graves were about a foot in width, and they were right next to each other.
Maybe they put them in vertically.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know, but that's the way they were.
Well, the fact that I'm curious, the fact that Jewish law wants us to be buried and not cremated, does that bear any weight for you?
No. At least I'm because you wind up more or less the same way anyway, unless they embalm you in such a way that, but you will still just wind up a skeleton.
Yeah.
You know, I don't, the trouble I find out with the Jewish laws, a lot of them were put into effect. I think your father said 4,000 years ago when it first started. Like, you're wearing a yarmulke?
Yeah.
No. That is tradition. They didn't wear yarmulkes until the 14th century.
Right.
They didn't have bar mitzvahs until about the same time. Those are traditions. Those aren't laws.
Mm.
In other words, I can go into a shul or synagogue without wearing one, and they won't. They may not like it, but they won't say anything about it.
Mm.
Yeah, you gotta. No, yeah.
Well, what do you like about the Jewish faith or culture? What do you find positive? What do you enjoy about it?
Positive about it. They managed to survive as a culture.
Mm-hmm.
They were always for education. I understand that in these shuttles where there are very few, practically no schools, everybody had at least the oldest learned.
Yeah.
He not only learned Hebrew, but he might have learned 2 or 3 other languages. They always prized, and I'm always sort of vicariously delighted when somebody gets the Nobel Prize that's Jewish. In fact, more Jews have gotten the Nobel Prize than you get.
Yeah. So education, that's good education is something that's important then.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, so that's what you want to pass down to your future generations. Get a good education, right?
It will have to be because it's getting very competitive.
Yeah.
Do you think it's getting more competitive?
Oh yeah.
So you got to start out with the best.
Right. That's right. Okay. What else? Anything else you want to add? I think we're almost out of time here.
Almost out.
Almost.
Anyway, like I say, I took Irene to Hawaii a number of times. I went to Peru. Where else did I go? Mexico with Irene. I've been to London twice. I've been to Hong Kong, Japan, Bali, Indonesia, which is quite a place. I like the East. I've never been to Israel, never appealed to me. It isn't what I would call a pretty place, you know, a tourist place exactly. Is it?
Yeah, I find it to be very beautiful, very vast and open.
Now your grandmother don't care for it, your grandfather liked it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Everybody has their own tastes.
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty. We'll fade out here and take it from there. So just say bye-bye.
Bye-bye.